You have probably tried to change with everything you had, and your subconscious mind did not move. That is because it does not learn through willpower. It learns through emotion and repetition. In this video, you are going to understand exactly how that mechanism works and what actually installs change for good. But before we get into it, subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about the mind, the subconscious, and identity in a way almost nobody else explains every single week. And leave a like, because that helps this content reach people who are still fighting their own willpower without understanding why. Most people who cannot sustain a change believe, deep down, that the problem is themselves. That they lacked grit, discipline, determination. That if they had just tried harder, it would have worked. But there is something almost nobody ever told you. Willpower and the subconscious mind are two completely different systems. One obeys what you decide. The other obeys what you repeat. Willpower is the effort you feel when you try to change. That part of you that knows what it wants, that decides, that resolves to act. And it has a limit. It runs out over the course of the day, it weakens under pressure. It disappears when you are tired or stressed. The subconscious mind is a different world entirely. It does not take part in your decisions. It does not listen to your arguments. It is not convinced by the logic you use to justify the change you want to make. It runs quietly in the background, and it controls most of what you do on autopilot. The problem is that the whole culture taught you to use the wrong tool. More discipline, more strength, more determination. And you went for it. You tried. And the subconscious mind kept doing exactly what it had always done. The right question is not why you do not have enough willpower. The right question is, what actually makes the subconscious mind learn and repeat something? Think of it this way. The brain learns from what gets practiced, not from what gets wished for. You can want to change with everything in you. You can spend hours studying the topic, watching videos, reading about it. But what your subconscious mind actually records is the pattern you repeat in practice, not the one you plan to repeat someday. And there is a second ingredient most people completely ignore: emotion. Emotion works like a recording amplifier. The more intense the emotion tied to an experience, the faster and the deeper it installs as a pattern. The brain uses emotional intensity as a signal that something matters. And whatever matters needs to become automatic, needs to get recorded. That is why a single traumatic event can change someone instantly. That is why one humiliating failure can create a fear that lasts for years. It was not a conscious decision. It was intense emotion recording a pattern into the system without asking permission. The problem shows up when we try to use logic to undo what emotion installed. I know this pattern does not serve me. You really do know that. But the subconscious mind does not care what you know. It cares about what you genuinely feel, with consistency. And here is the most counterintuitive part of all of this. The subconscious mind treats the familiar as safe. Even when the familiar is hurting you. Even when you want out of it with everything your willpower has. If you grew up in an environment of scarcity, your subconscious mind learned that scarcity is the normal state. Familiar. Safe. And when you try to step into a different pattern, abundance, confidence, calm, the system feels a kind of strangeness, as if that state were not real, as if it did not fit who you are. And the name for that is not self-sabotage. It is protection that is simply miscalibrated. And there is one last thing that makes all of this even clearer: the difference between knowing and sustaining. The conscious mind learns fast. You hear an explanation and you get it right away. But the body, the emotional system, the subconscious layer, those take much longer to recognize something new as true. Picture a dirt road. You carve out a new path, but the old road is still paved. The car defaults to the pavement automatically. The defaults to the pavement automatically. The new path only becomes a road once you walk it enough times to pack it down. That image of the road is going to be the anchor for this entire video. Because there are several ways people try to walk that new path, and not all of them works the same way. Everyone who has ever tried to change recognizes at least one of these paths. There is change through shock. You take a hard hit, a crisis, a loss, a diagnosis, and you shift your behavior overnight. The problem is that shock creates urgency, not identity. Once the pain fades, the old pattern comes back. And it comes back because it is still the most familiar option. Then there is discipline. You build a routine, set rules, hold everything together through sheer effort. It works as long as the energy lasts. But willpower runs out, and the moment you stop forcing it, the system goes right back to what it knows. There is also change through inspiration. That video that left you electrified, that talk that made everything feel possible. Inspiration sparks something real. But it is like fireworks. It lights everything up for a moment and then it is gone. No pattern is left behind. Only the memory of what once felt possible. And there is a fourth path, the one built on emotional repetition, the kind that eventually becomes identity. Not because you forced it, not because you were afraid, not because you got excited for a day, not because you got excited for a day, but because the new pattern was repeated with real emotion until it stopped feeling strange and became your natural state. The strongest change is not the one that impresses. It is the one that becomes natural. And this is exactly where most people get stuck, because before reaching that fourth path, there are a few very specific beliefs that block everything before it even starts. You watch content on this topic, you understand the problem, you feel like this time will be different, and it is not. Most people blame themselves for that. But what is actually happening is something else entirely. The subconscious mind does not learn through understanding. It learns through emotional practice. You can fully understand why you are afraid of failing and still freeze the moment you need to act. Knowing does not change what you feel. Only what you practice with emotion changes what you feel. Then there are affirmations. I am abundant. I am capable. I attract opportunities. Repeated 10 times a day with no emotion on autopilot. That installs nothing in the subconscious mind. It is just noise. The subconscious mind does not respond to words. It responds to the emotional state behind those words. An affirmation said on autopilot is like sending a message with the right text, but no signal. Another very common pattern is believing that forcing positive thinking solves the problem. When your real internal state is fear, scarcity, or anxiety, and you force the opposite thoughts without addressing that state, the subconscious mind ends up in conflict. You push positivity with your head while your body pulls you down. That does not create alignment, it creates resistance. And there is one last belief, maybe the most dangerous one. Believing the problem is a lack of capability, that you were simply not built for this, that it works for everyone except you. What is actually happening is not incapacity. It is a conflict between the identity you carry and the goal you are trying to reach. Your subconscious mind is protecting who it thinks you are, and until the new identity gets installed through emotion and repetition, it is going to keep getting in the way. The problem was never a lack of strength. It was using strength where the system learns in a completely different way. So the real question becomes, what approach actually works with the way the subconscious mind learns? Most people who cannot change are trying to reach a new place through the same old road: effort, pressure, control. And the subconscious mind does not respond to that. It has its own language. Emotion without repetition is a spark that fades out. Repetition without emotion is a mechanical habit that carries no identity. What truly changes the subconscious mind is when both show up together. Real emotion sustained by consistent repetition. When you act in a new way without feeling anything real inside, the subconscious mind does not register it as important. It is like a scene that passes by without leaving a mark. But when you act in a new way with a genuine emotion, relief, confidence, presence, the system marks that, records it. Starts to understand that this state exists for you. What most people do is try to prove they have changed through huge moments. A massive decision, a radical effort, one dramatic turning point. What actually works is the opposite. Practice in small, consistent doses in situations with low pressure. It is not a performance, it is training. And training has its own logic. You do not start by lifting the maximum weight, you start with what you can sustain consistently. The same applies here. Change begins in small contexts, in low pressure moments, in situations you already have a handle on, not in crises. The new state first needs to show up where you can hold on to it long enough for it to get recorded. And the goal is not to look different for a few minutes. It is to make the new state familiar. Because once the new state becomes familiar, the subconscious mind starts treating it as safe. And once it feels safe in that new state, it stops pulling you back toward the old one. The key is that one word, familiar. Everything you carry today as who you are was at some point repeated with enough emotion to become natural. The old pattern is not who you are, it is who you trained yourself to be. And the new one follows the exact same logic. It is not born from a decision. It is born from sustained emotional repetition. The mind changes when the new state stops being an exercise and becomes a familiar place. That is what nobody has taught you until now. Understanding the approach is one thing. Knowing how to apply it day to day is another. And that is exactly what comes next. Before we keep going, there is something I want to show you. Everything we have been building here, the subconscious mind, identity, emotional repetition, this is exactly the kind of content I organized into a practical resource. Because I noticed a lot of people understand the mechanism but get lost when it is time to apply it. The ebook gives you a structured path to turn this understanding into real practice with what to do, how to do it, and how to sustain it without needing some heroic effort. I used these exact same principles when I had to relearn how my own internal system worked, and I condensed what worked into something direct and applicable. If you are at the point where you understand the mechanism but still do not know how to start, this resource was made for you. The link is in the description. But back to it, because understanding the right approach means nothing if you do not know how to actually put it into practice. The first move is not the biggest one. It is the simplest one you can actually sustain. The starting point is awareness, recognizing the moment the old state shows up. What is the trigger? For a lot of people, it is something every day, opening the banking app and feeling a tightness in the chest, getting an opportunity and immediately assuming it will not work out, reaching the end of the month and slipping into automatic survival mode. The trigger is not the enemy. It is a marker. It is the exact point where the old pattern gets activated. You know that feeling of opening your account and your stomach nodding up before you even see the balance? That is the pattern activating. And the only thing you need to do in that moment is name it. Do not analyze it, do not judge it, do not try to fix it. Just recognize what is there. This is fear, this is scarcity. This is the old version of me reacting. That simple act starts to create distance between you and the pattern. You become an observer, not just an automatic executor. From there, you choose a single new pattern to work on. Not your entire life. One pattern. One state. Something simple and specific that, if it became your natural state, would change how you react to that trigger. Do not try to overhaul everything at once. That is exactly what burns people out and makes them quit. And then comes repetition, in small, predictable moments throughout the day. Before checking email, before making a decision. In calm moments where you can hold the state long enough for it to get recorded. You do not need to fix your entire life right now. You need to interrupt one pattern at a time, and that alone changes everything. And once you have mastered this in calm moments, the next step is what actually puts the change to the test. At some point you will notice you can already hold the new state on the quiet days. But the first time real pressure hits, the old pattern still wins. That is the sign you have moved into the next stage of the process, and that the change is happening. It just has not been truly tested yet, because here the move is different. You start acting differently, even when you do not feel completely ready. At first, you practice the new state, when you were calm, when the environment was on your side, when there was no pressure. Now you start holding that state when real pressure shows up, in a negotiation, in a bill that just arrived, in a rejection, in a moment where the old state would normally be the automatic reaction. And this is where relapse comes in. At some point, you will react the old way again. That does not invalidate the process. It reveals where the old pattern is still alive. A relapse is information, not failure. It shows you exactly where the next bit of work needs to happen. What you learn to do at this stage is to not abandon the process when you slip. You observe what happened, you name what triggered it, and you return to the new state right after, without carrying the weight of feeling like you lost everything. There is one more thing that makes a real difference here: your environment. If you stay surrounded by the same triggers that feed the old pattern, the same conversations, the same information habits, the same relationships that reinforce the identity you are trying to leave behind, it is going to be much harder to sustain the new state. Adjusting your environment is not running from reality. It is choosing to stop actively feeding the version of you that you no longer want to be. Your new state only proves itself when it shows up under pressure. That is the only place you really find out whether you have actually changed. And it is precisely at this stage, while you are making progress, that the most dangerous mistakes tend to show up. You try for a few days, you do not feel any visible effect, and you stop. This happens to almost everyone. And it is exactly the mistake that kills the process before it ever gets a real chance to work. The subconscious mind does not respond to immediate results. It responds to accumulated consistency. Quitting in that window is like leaving the gym after 1 week because you still do not have muscle. The process was working, you just left before you could see it. There is another very common pattern. You go through the motions, you do the visualization, but your mind is somewhere else entirely. It turns into an empty ritual, and an empty ritual records nothing. You already know that. Excessive control also destroys a lot of progress. You practice the new state, and then you spend the rest of the day anxious about when it is finally going to work. That constant state of alert cancels out what you were trying to install. You build with one hand and tear down with the other. And there is one last mistake, maybe the quietest of them all: changing your language without changing your state. You start saying, "I am changing, I am different now, I am not like that anymore," while reacting exactly the same way in the situations that actually matter. What destroys the process is not a lack of talent. It is inconsistency and unresolved internal conflict. And the good news is that there are specific tools that help you sustain the new state day to day. And that is exactly what comes next. A lot of people visualize as if they were watching a movie of themselves. And that has very little impact. Visualization really works when it comes with a real physical sensation. How does your body feel when it is in the state you want to install? The chest opening up, the breath staying calm, the feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be. When that physical sensation is present, visualization stops being fantasy and starts creating real familiarity. There is also identity writing. Not generic affirmations like "I am rich" or "I am successful," but short, realistic sentences about who you are becoming. I make decisions calmly. I face discomfort without running from it. Sentences your subconscious mind can actually believe right now, not in some distant future. And for trigger moments, breathing works as an emergency brake. The moment you feel the old pattern activating, before you react, before you speak, before you decide, 3 slow breaths create just enough space for you to choose the state instead of being swept along by autopilot. Your environment is a tool too. What you listen to before important tasks, what you read in the morning, who you spend time with, all of that either feeds or drains the state you are trying to build. A good tool is not the strongest one. It is the one that helps the new state stay stable long enough to become normal. And with these tools in hand, what is left is understanding what to actually expect while the process unfolds. The first sign does not show up out there. It shows up in here, in your body, in your state, in the way you react before you even think. Before any visible external change, what you start to feel is less internal conflict. That voice that always argues back when you try to act differently starts to lose its grip. The tension between what you want and what you automatically do starts to ease. It does not feel dramatic, but it is the most concrete sign that the process is working. Then comes emotional stability. You start making decisions from a different state. Not perfect, different, less reactive. With a little more space between the trigger and the response. And only after that, Once the internal shift has gone far enough, does the external start to respond? The opportunities that come your way start to feel different. The decisions you make lead somewhere different. Not because the world changed, but because you started interacting with it from a different state. There is no exact timeline. And the first signs are going to feel small. But small signs of progress are still progress. Do not dismiss what feels insignificant at the start. Real change reorganizes you from the inside first. The world catches up after. And now that you know what to expect, what is left is bringing it all together into one single path, simple enough to start and to sustain. You have come a long way in this video. You understood the mechanism, you saw where most people go wrong, you learned what actually works. And what is left now is simpler than it seems. The starting point is always the same. Observe the old pattern without judgment. Not to blame yourself, not to analyze it until you freeze. Just to recognize, this is where the automatic response happens. That recognition is the beginning of everything. Then you choose a single new state to repeat, something simple, specific, and realistic. And you practice that state with genuine emotion, in low-pressure situations, in predictable moments. You do not wait for motivation to show up. You create the state before you feel ready, and you repeat it until it stops feeling forced. Along the way, you adjust your environment around the new identity. You stop consuming what feeds the old pattern. Stop spending time with what reinforces the version of yourself you want to leave behind. Stop giving attention to anything that keeps the system stuck in the same place. And you measure progress by your internal reaction, not just by external results. Do you catch yourself reacting differently in a situation that used to freeze you? That is progress. Do you feel less conflict between what you want and what you do? That is progress. The external will catch up, but the real signal comes from within, and you sustain it. This is not theory, this is simply how the subconscious mind learns, and always has. You just did not know how to use that to your advantage until now. Remember the image of the road? The old pattern is the paved road. The car defaults there automatically. The new one is a dirt path that gets packed down a little more with every pass. With consistent emotional repetition, it becomes a road too. And once it becomes a road, you do not have to force it anymore, you simply walk it. The new you is not born from a heroic effort. It is born from emotional repetition that your system finally accepts as true. You made it all the way here, and that already says something. Most people quit halfway through, move on to something else, look for a faster answer. You stayed. And throughout this video, you understood something very few people ever truly grasp. Change is not a matter of strength. It is a matter of emotional state. Repeated until it becomes identity. The ebook goes further than what was possible to cover here. I had to build this process in my own life before I could ever teach it, and what remained is what is in that material. It goes into the identity layer, into the process of consolidating who you are becoming, not just how to start. If you want to go deeper into that consolidation and have a more structured path to follow through the process, the link is in the description. In the comments, tell me one thing. Which pattern did you recognize in yourself the most throughout this video? Write it down below, I read every single one. And subscribe to the channel, because every week here we go deep into topics like this one, the subconscious mind, identity, how the mind actually works, and how to use that to really change your life. And if you know someone who keeps trying to change through willpower and cannot understand why it is not working, send them this video. Sometimes the right idea at the right moment is all that is missing. I will see you in the next one.